The Quit India movement was launched against the British in August 1942. It was a call for Indians to either do or die. The British had never faced such a strong passive resistance before, but they were prepared to act. Within hours of Gandhi's speech, the British had jailed almost the entire Indian National Congress leadership. There was a grave chance that the movement could die down. However, a bunch of young socialist leaders were preparing for this crisis. They had resolved to keep the freedom call alive. It was also a great opportunity to prove their mettle. In the group was Ram Manohar Lohia, a Germany-educated 30-year-old socialist leader. He had secretly set up an underground radio station in Mumbai. Fiery speeches were broadcast, asking the nation to overthrow the British Raj. Before the British police could find Lohia, he had fled to Kolkata. There, he printed thousands of pamphlets urging Indians to boycott the British rule. He was a wanted man on the run. But the nation knew the freedom call was still alive.
इन लोगों ने आज़ाद रास्ता एक गुरिल्ला फौज बनाने का कार्यक्रम बनाया था और उसकी ट्रेनिंग नेपाल में होती थी। भारत में तो संभव नहीं था, तो बाज़ाब्ता वो बंदूक वगैरह की ट्रेनिंग, राइफल की ट्रेनिंग, परेड वगैरह सब करके एक सैनिक रास्ता तैयार करने की कोशिश हो रही थी।
The British were baffled by the courage of these youngsters, but soon located their whereabouts. They sent word to the Rana rulers of Nepal, and Lohia and Jayaprakash were arrested within hours. The Ranas were only too happy to please the British. Lohia and Jayaprakash were locked up at a makeshift prison in Hanuman Nagar, and their movement came under threat.
वहाँ से 10-12 किलोमीटर की दूरी पर ये जो आज़ाद रास्ता के सैनिक थे, वो अपनी ट्रेनिंग ले रहे थे। जब उन लोगों को पता चला कि हमारे सभी नेता लोहिया जयप्रकाश वगैरह गिरफ्तार हो गए हैं, तो इतनी दूर तक वो दौड़ते हुए आए और वहाँ संतरी वगैरह को मार के हटा करके और उसके बाद इन लोगों को उस जेल से मुक्त कराया।
This widely known incident in Nepal's history is known as the Hanuman Nagar episode. And for the very first time, it brought the Indian and Nepalese revolutionaries together. This time-tested friendship exists even today.
वो एक अद्भुत पार्टनरशिप था नेपाल और भारतीय क्रांतिकारियों के बीच, अद्भुत पार्टनरशिप। और उस पार्टनरशिप का जो असर जयप्रकाश और लोहिया पर पड़ा, वो जयप्रकाश और लोहिया के प्रभाव और उनका नेपाल के प्रति प्रतिबद्धता और स्नेह के बगैर नेपाल की आज की राजनीति को नहीं समझा जा सकता है।
The Quit India movement had caught the imagination of the entire country. Lohia and Jayaprakash were still at large, traveling across the country urging their countrymen to reject the British administration. It had been 2 years since they had begun, and by now they were household names. India had found 2 new heroes. In May 1944, the British finally succeeded in arresting Lohia and Jayaprakash. They were placed in the notorious Lahore jail, where they underwent inhuman torture for 2 years. Even while every other leader was released, the British continued to torture Lohia and Jayaprakash. It took no less than Gandhiji's personal intervention for the British to release them. When Lohia came out of prison, he had lost his father. But he had succeeded in doing a great service to his motherland. Ram Manohar Lohia was born on 12th March 1910 in Akbarpur, Uttar Pradesh into a Marwari family. His father Hira Lal was a staunch nationalist and took him to take Gandhi's blessing when he was just 10 years old. He was so inspired by Gandhi's transforming personality that he joined the Satyagraha March at that young age. Gandhi's influence was to remain with him all through his life. After completing his high school from Banaras Hindu University and graduation from Calcutta University, Lohia went to study in England, as was the norm those days. But very soon he realized that he did not want to study in a country that looked upon him and his countrymen as subordinates. He promptly left and enrolled himself at the Humboldt University in Berlin, known those days as the Friedrich Wilhelms Universität.
उस ज़माने में जो इतिहासवादी शाखा थी उसके सबसे बड़े जो विद्वान थे वर्नर सोमबार्ड, उनके पास गए तो ये 18 बरस के कहते थे, मेरी उम्र थी। मैंने उनसे धड़ल्ले में अंग्रेज़ी में बात करना शुरू की तो वो सुनते रहे। उन्होंने कहा कि नहीं, मैं तो अंग्रेज़ी नहीं जानता। और इनको बड़ा आश्चर्य हुआ कि संसार का अपने स्कूल का, हिस्टोरिकल स्कूल का सबसे बड़ा विद्वान और कहता है कि मैं अंग्रेज़ी नहीं जानता।
Lohia's evolution had begun. He learned German in 6 months and began his studies reading the original works of Hegel and Marx in German. He realized that even they did not have a definite solution to society's problems. Instead, he began getting drawn to socialism and its core idea to empower the weaker sections of society.
Marxism believes that imperialism comes as a result of the development of capitalism. So capitalism develops in England and it can't be contained in its own place. So it begins to flow out in acquiring other countries. But Lohia said that is not correct. That way Marx will always make the colonies lag behind the others who have already gone ahead. So you will always be playing the second fiddle. He said that they are happened together. He says that capitalism cannot grow to the extent it grew in Europe unless it had imperial colonies. It is not as if capitalism develops and then have colonies, but in order to develop, it has to have colony. So it is like saying, the British gave us railways, we say. You can also say, we gave the British the railways. Now, there are Europeans who think like that, but Lohia thought this much earlier because he came in contact with Gandhi.
His 3.5 years in Berlin had a decisive effect on the development of his mindset. His exposure to an education system and society that had no parallel to what he was familiar with widened his mental horizon and contributed to making him the holistic thinker that he became. Now Lohia, all of 23 years old, decided to return to India.
I think the most original thinker in India after Gandhi was Lohia. Lohia, I think, was the first Indian mind to be influenced very deeply by the West and return to India. This kind of return has always happened. With Aurobindo it happened. Aurobindo was trained to become an Englishman. He was almost an Englishman. He had an English name also. His father didn't want him to have a Bengali name. But then he deliberately failed his ICS examination and turned to India. There is a return to India in Nehru also. But the return is not a total return. That was Lohia's quarrel with Nehru. With Gandhi, there was a real return.
On 17th May 1934, the first socialist outfit in India was formed under the umbrella of the Congress, and it was called the Congress Socialist Party. Lohia was one of its founding members. The newly appointed president of the Indian National Congress, Nehru, was impressed by Lohia's views on socialism. He hailed Lohia as the new star in the Indian political scene. Lohia, too, happily accepted Nehru's guidance and soon found himself in charge of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Congress. He began working closely with Nehru, and in the next 2 years laid the foundation for what was to become India's foreign policy for many years to come. The country's later principle of non-alignment had found its foundations. Some even began calling Lohia India's first non-official foreign minister. But this comfortable equation with Nehru was to change beyond recognition in the years to come.
We ask no favors of the enemy.
Like the rest of the world, the Second World War created a divide within the Indian National Congress too. Nehru wanted India to go to war along with the British. Lohia believed the war was an opportunity to weaken the British and put forward their demand for Indian independence. But his views were rejected. Indian soldiers fought for the British, and thousands lost their lives. This episode greatly disturbed the patriot in Lohia, and his relationship with Nehru, which up until now was a disciple-mentor relationship, had begun to sour.
They were great friends at one time. Lohia used to go and stay in Nehru's. As a matter of fact, one of the early Nehruites was Lohia. His conversion was from Nehruism into Gandhism.
Many years later, in 1946, when Lohia was released from the Lahore prison and was now a very popular hero of the Quit India movement, Nehru extended him a hand of friendship once again. He offered Lohia the post of General Secretary of the Congress. But deep introspection had convinced Lohia that Nehru's vision for India greatly differed from his own. Without hesitation, he rejected Nehru's offer and resolved to walk alone.
You can divide Indian thinking, into two. You have either Gandhians or Nehruites. Now, if you ask me who the communists are, they are Nehruites, modernizers. Okay? And there is the Gandhian way of thinking. Those who want more decentralization, power to the villages, and those who don't want agricultural land to be used for industries. The British began to create SEZ in India and then took over. And now we are doing SEZ. So all these he was opposed to because he was a Gandhian. But Nehru thought of the dams as the new temples of India.
The inhuman torture at Lahore prison had left Lohia physically weak. His friends urged him to go to their home in Goa and rest for a few days to regain his health. So he left for Goa, not knowing that his quiet, private trip would ignite the Goan independence movement against its 450-year-old Portuguese rule.